Earlier this year, I lost my grandfather. But back when I was still locked up, I lost my father. And he lived a crazy life. He raised me with bedtime stories about smuggling drugs and being a political activist and being down and out and strung out, and then turning his life around to become a substance use counselor who profoundly affected his community. I got locked up in 2002, and 2 years later he came to visit me in the prison. He said, "Jesse, I'm just done. I'm ready to be gone. I want to go to Costa Rica. I've wanted to go to Costa Rica for a long time, but I need to know that you're going to be okay. You got to be in here for the next 30 years, and I need to know you can make it without me." And in my mind, I'm this kid who's like, "No, I don't want you to leave. Like, you're my support. Like, you're the thing that makes me feel connected to the world." But I'd already put him and my mother and everybody else through so much, there was no way I was going to tell him not to go. And he was down there living this crazy life, leading tours and running cabinas and running around shirtless and running through crocodiles. And he was loving his life until one day he just fell out. And they had to airlift him to San Jose. And they didn't know what was wrong, but after a bunch of tests, they realized he had a blood clot that had thrown. So they were able to fix that, but they said, "Mr. Crossan, you've got an issue with your heart. We need to replace one of your heart valves. Everything else looks healthy, but we need to replace this valve." And when he left the country, we were only allowed to talk once every 3 months because we couldn't do it through the inmate phone system. We actually had to do it through a counselor who would sit me down and sit there through the course of the conversation. But they made an exception and let me talk to him, and I'd never heard my dad scared like this before. Like, he just felt like he knew it was over, and that affected me. So while everybody else was telling me, "Oh, it'll be fine, it's really standard," like, I just knew there was going to be a problem. I knew it wasn't going to be okay. And in the course of all this, I went to the hole. I was bringing syrup back from the chow hall, and the moment you cross that line, you're no longer in the chow hall, but instead on the boulevard, anything you have from the kitchen is contraband. And sometimes they take it, sometimes they give you a charge, sometimes they lock you up. So they actually put me in the hole for contraband syrup. So I was sitting back there the day of his surgery, and I was kind of pacing, and I couldn't sleep, and I hadn't really slept for 2 or 3 days, and again, everybody was telling me it was going to be okay, but to me, I just knew it was going to be a disaster. And the day of the surgery, the psychologist came by the cell and she said, "Hey, Jesse, I want to let you know, like, your dad's okay. He came out of surgery, everything's fine." It didn't make sense because I felt like I knew in my heart it wasn't going to be okay. I knew something was going to be wrong, but I just accepted it. And I went and I laid down. I got some of the first sleep I'd gotten in days. And while I was laying there, I remember the door opened, and they don't ever open the door on the hole. They make you go to the door, you cuff up, and then they open the door. The door opened, there was an officer there who was like, "Go, Crossan, we got to put these on you." He put the handcuffs on me, he put the shackles on me, and they proceeded to march me down the boulevard. And they marched me up to the front of the prison, and I didn't know where I was going, and they actually took me to the section that says "No inmate past this point," and marched me across that red line. And I was looking around like, what is this, a setup? What's going on? And then when that door opened, there was my mother and my stepfather. And as soon as I saw them, I just asked, "Is it my dad?" And my mom just kind of nodded yes, and I just lost it. I started crying. Again, I'm in handcuffs behind me, wearing shackles. Like, this is not the place that I want to hear that my dad just died. And they were so nice, they actually put the handcuffs in front of me, and they took the shackles off so I could sit there with them for a few minutes. And then they went to take me back to the hole, and the psychologist reached out the door, the same one who had told me it was okay, and said, "No, I need you to bring him to me. Bring him to me right now." As soon as I got in the office, she made them take the handcuffs off me. She said, "Jesse, what do you need? Do you need to be in the hole to grieve? Do you need to be in population? What do you need right now?" And I asked her to please get me out of there. I had already served 7 of the 10 days they were giving me for contraband syrup, and she was like, "I got you, don't worry about it." She called records, and they moved me that same day. So I go up into a pod in the middle of the day, not at a time that somebody's getting out of the hole. Nobody knew what was going on. I was depressed. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Finally, word got around the pod because somebody knew my situation. And all of a sudden, people started showing up and like bringing me coffee and bringing me other things and just basically clapping me on the shoulder and asking me if I was okay. And this group of people, none of whom I knew because I'd never lived in that pod before, showed up because they knew the experience of losing someone on the outside. And I think about that psychologist using every bit of authority she had to do what she thought was right. Because that wasn't policy, that wasn't what they said was supposed to happen. She said this is what needs to happen for his mental health because he needs to be considered in this moment. And those moments of humanity inside, in a place that felt inhumane so much of the time, were so profound and stuck out, and I will never forget her for that. But I couldn't really grieve. I remember sitting in that cell and looking at pictures of him and pictures of us together and trying to make myself cry, trying to just crack that dam open so it could all come out, and I couldn't. But a year and a half later, I got transferred from there to Buckingham Correctional Center, and the first thing they do is strip search you and then go through all your property to take something you're not allowed to have. And they were going through my pictures, and they were taking out all the pictures of my dad because he didn't have his shirt on. And I remember asking, like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, what's wrong with those pictures?" They said, "Oh, those meet the qualification of semi-nude pictures, you can't have them." And I remember tearing up, and I remember shaking and being angry and feeling like I was going to lose my mind, like I was absolutely out of control. And one of the property officers saw me, and I remember him looking me in the eye as I had tears coming down my face, and he started taking a couple of the pictures and sliding them back in the pile, even as the other officer was taking them out. But still, they took the vast majority of the pictures I had of my father because he never wore a shirt in Costa Rica, because it was constantly 80 or 90 degrees, because he was living this tropical paradise. And losing those, that was the moment where I really started to grieve. That was the moment where it really hit me that he was gone and that I would never get a picture of him again.